Welcome to the world of science fiction Neon's Alien. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you never miss a new story from Neon's Alien universe. It was a quiet night on Joe's farm. The sky was full of stars. The wind was soft and the fields were calm. Joe, an old farmer with a kind heart, had just finished his dinner and was sitting on the porch with a cup of warm tea. He was about to go to bed when he heard it. A strange, soft cry coming from the barn. At first, he thought it was just a stray cat. But the sound wasn't right. It wasn't a meow. It was more like a baby. A baby crying in pain. Joe stood up, grabbed his flashlight, and walked toward the barn. As he opened the old wooden door, the smell of hay and old tools filled the air. The cry came again, louder this time. Joe slowly followed the sound, stepping carefully through the dark barn. Then he saw it. In a pile of hay, something small was shaking. Joe pointed the flashlight and gasped. It wasn't a cat. It wasn't any animal he had ever seen. It had tiny, silver scales like armor and two short wings folded tight against its back. Its eyes were glowing a faint green, and it had sharp little claws that looked too big for its weak, thin arms. The creature looked like a dragon, but not from any book or movie. It looked alien. Joe's first instinct was to run. But then, he saw the creature was trembling. It was cold, and its ribs were showing. The poor thing looked like it hadn't eaten in days. Joe slowly stepped forward. "Easy now," he said in a calm voice. "I won't hurt you." The little dragon flinched at first, but didn't move away. It was too weak. Joe took off his coat and gently wrapped the creature inside. It felt hot, like it had a fever, but it also gave off a strange warmth of its own, like a tiny fire was burning inside it. Back in the house, Joe placed the creature on a soft blanket near the fireplace. It stopped crying, but its eyes stayed wide open, watching him carefully. Joe tried giving it some milk. The creature sniffed it and turned its head away. He offered it bread. No reaction. He tried fruit. The dragon pushed it away with its claw and let out a tired growl, barely a whisper. Joe sighed. "What do you eat, little guy?" The creature made a soft noise in reply, but it meant nothing to Joe. He looked at the fireplace. An idea came. He picked up a piece of cooked meat, some leftover steak, and held it close to the flames for a few seconds. Then he gave it to the creature. At first, the baby dragon didn't react. Then it sniffed the meat, slowly opened its mouth and took a bite. In seconds, it gobbled the whole piece down. Joe smiled. "So you like it hot, huh?" He gave it more fire-warmed meat, and it ate like it hadn't eaten in weeks. Its eyes lit up brighter. Its skin shimmered. Joe could feel a light heat rising from its tiny body. "All right," Joe whispered. "You're gonna be okay now." He sat back in his chair, watching the strange creature slowly curl up and fall asleep on the blanket. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind blew gently over the fields, but Joe's mind was racing. Where did this thing come from? Was it dangerous? Was someone, or something, looking for it? He didn't know, but one thing was clear in his heart. He couldn't leave it out there to die. He looked at the sleeping creature and said, "You can stay here, little one. But let's keep you a secret, all right?" Suddenly, a strange mark on the creature's forehead began to glow faintly in the dark. Joe watched, confused. It looked like a symbol, a circle with 3 sharp lines inside it. Before he could think more about it, the barn door slammed shut on its own. No wind, no animals. Joe stood up, alert. Something was watching them. And far above the clouds, miles away in the black sky, a satellite light blinked red, as if signaling someone, or something, that the creature had been found. The sun had not yet risen. A strange fog rolled over Joe's farm, thick, silver, and glowing. It didn't feel like normal morning mist. It hummed, soft, like music from far away. Joe woke early as usual, put on his boots, and stepped outside. He stopped in his tracks. The fog was moving strangely. It circled the barn like a slow dance. He had never seen anything like it. Even the animals were silent. The cows didn't moo, the chickens didn't cluck. The air felt watched. Joe grabbed a shovel just in case. He pushed the barn door open and found the little dragon curled under the blanket, but it wasn't shivering anymore, it was glowing. Soft heat came from its body. The silver scales now shimmered with gold along the edges. Its wings twitched, growing longer. Something inside it had changed overnight. Then it opened its eyes. Bright, green. Calm, but alert. Joe stepped closer, and the dragon lifted its head. "You're stronger today," Joe said softly. The dragon let out a small chirp. Joe walked back into the kitchen, cut a piece of leftover meat, and cooked it over the stove. Extra hot. He walked back and placed it down near the dragon. To his surprise, the dragon looked at him, then the food, then opened its mouth. Not to eat, but to breathe. Joe jumped back. A tiny puff of blue fire came out. Not red, not yellow. Blue, like a star burning in the night. It didn't burn the floor. It didn't catch the hay. It simply floated like smoke made of light, then disappeared. The baby dragon looked confused, as if it didn't mean to do it. Joe blinked. "Well, I guess you are a fire breather." The dragon happily ate the hot meat after that. Then it sat up straighter, stretching its wings, showing signs of fast growth. Its claws had sharpened. Its tail was longer. Joe stared at the creature. It looked healthier. Smarter. Smarter than a normal animal. After feeding, the dragon slowly walked across the barn floor toward Joe. It stopped, lifted one claw, and touched Joe's boot. Then it made a soft sound. Joe. Joe leaned down. "What did you say?" Joe, it said again. Joe's heart nearly stopped. The dragon had said his name. It had learned his name just by hearing him speak. Joe sat down, confused but amazed. "You're not just a creature, are you? You're something special." Before Joe could think more, he heard a noise outside, buzzing, low and mechanical, like a drone. Joe peeked out the barn window. In the fog above the fields, something floated. A round, dark shape with red, blinking lights. It was scanning the land, moving slowly, looking for something, looking for the dragon. Joe's heart raced. He closed the barn door quietly and grabbed an old blanket. He quickly covered the baby dragon and whispered, "Shh. You have to stay quiet now. Someone's looking for you." The dragon tilted its head but obeyed. The buzzing grew louder, passed over the barn, then moved on. Joe waited for 5 minutes before breathing again. He looked down at the covered creature. "What have I gotten myself into?" he muttered. Then the dragon made a soft noise again, curling up beside Joe's foot. Outside, the strange fog began to clear. But it left behind something unusual. A ring of black marks burned into the field. Not made by tires, not made by tools. It was a perfect circle, large and glowing faintly. Joe walked to it and saw small ashes in the middle, like something had landed there and left. He touched the mark. It was still warm. Joe looked at the sky. No planes, no jets, just a single cloud, spinning in a slow spiral. That night, as the dragon slept peacefully beside the fire, Joe sat at his table, flipping through an old science book. He was never much of a reader, but tonight he was searching for answers. Nothing in the book helped. No dragons, no glowing fog, no floating drones. But deep inside, Joe knew. This wasn't just about a creature anymore. Something far bigger was coming, and it started the moment he fed that baby alien fire. For the next 2 days, everything seemed quiet on Joe's farm. Too quiet. The birds didn't sing, the cows didn't moo, the wind didn't blow the same way. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath. Inside the barn, the alien baby, dragon, now named Spark, was growing faster than any creature Joe had ever seen. Its wings were longer, its body stronger, and its scales changed color each night, silver to gold, gold to glowing orange. But that wasn't the strangest thing. Each night, Spark stared at the sky through the barn window. He wasn't looking at the stars. He was looking past them, as if he knew something was coming. Joe noticed it. "Are you waiting for someone?" Joe asked one night. Spark didn't answer. He just let out a soft hum, low and deep like a machine warming up. That night, as Joe was heading to bed, something strange happened. His old radio, long broken and full of dust, turned on by itself. The speakers crackled with static. Then came a sound. Not a voice, not music, a coded signal. Beep. Pause. Beep. Beep. Long beep. Joe froze. He stared at the radio in disbelief. Then he heard it again. This time, from the sky above. A blinking red. Light moved silently across the clouds. No sound of engines, no blinking wings. Not a plane. Joe stepped outside into the cool night air. The light was scanning the ground. A thin beam of purple light swept over the cornfield. The cows stood still, not moving. The chickens were quiet. Then the beam turned toward the barn. Joe ran fast, faster than his old legs liked. He burst through the barn door and yelled, "Hide, Spark!" But Spark was already hiding, under the floorboards. The planks had lifted on their own, as if guided by invisible hands. A small space glowed under the floor, shaped like a pod or nest, as if someone or something had prepared it before. Joe stared at the glowing space. "You made that?" he asked. Spark gave a soft nod, eyes glowing like fireflies. The beam from the sky touched the barn wall. It stopped. Joe held his breath. Then, just as quickly, the beam vanished and the red light flew away, fast, into the stars. But the signal still played on the radio. Now it had words. Faint. Robotic. Cold. Subject located. Class Delta Fireborne. Immediate retrieval requested. Earth coordinates locked. Joe turned the radio off and sat down. He felt the weight of something much bigger than himself. Who were these beings? Why were they after Spark, and what did Delta Fireborne mean? He looked down at Spark. The little dragon was curled up in the glowing space, but his eyes were wide open, watching Joe. "You're not just rare," Joe whispered. "You're hunted." The next morning, Joe found the cornfield burned in a perfect spiral. No fire had been seen, no smoke, just ash in a circle, 10 meters wide. In the middle was a small black object. He picked it up carefully. It was cold, smooth, and shaped like a triangle. On one side, it showed a flickering image. Spark, trapped inside a cage of red energy. Joe's hands shook. "This is a warning," he said. Spark stepped out of the barn slowly and stood beside Joe. His small body shined in the sunlight. For the first time, Joe saw a faint crest on his forehead. It looked like a flame surrounded by stars. "You're part of something ancient, aren't you?" Joe said. "They want to take you because you're dangerous. Or maybe because you're powerful." Spark looked up at him and said one word. "Run." Joe blinked. "What did you say?" "Run." Spark repeated clearer this time. Before Joe could ask anything else, the sky cracked with thunder. But there were no clouds. Just a tear in the blue sky, opening like a doorway. Something was coming through. Something big. Something that wasn't friendly. Joe grabbed his tools and ran toward the barn. He didn't know how to fight whatever was arriving. But he knew one thing. He wasn't giving Spark up. Not now. Not ever. The tear in the sky didn't look natural. It wasn't made of clouds or lightning. It was black like space, yet it moved like water, swirling slowly above Joe's farm. It hung there, silent and heavy, like a crack in the world itself. Joe stared up at it, holding his breath. Then, without a sound, a ship slipped through. It wasn't like anything Joe had seen before. It looked like a floating blade, sharp and dark. No engines, no lights. Just a thin red glow along its edges. It hovered silently above the fields. Joe pulled Spark inside the barn and closed the doors. "What is that?" he asked. Spark didn't speak. He just stared at the ship, his eyes glowing brighter than ever. The red glow from the ship shot a beam straight down onto the spiral mark in Joe's field. Then they arrived. From the beam, 3 tall figures floated down. They were not human. Their bodies were slim, covered in black armor that shimmered like oil. Their faces were hidden behind smooth silver masks. They didn't walk. They glided across the ground like ghosts. Joe watched from a crack in the barn wall. One of them touched the ash in the spiral, then it spoke. Not in words, but in a voice that filled the air around them. The hatchling was here. Its fire lingers. Joe felt a chill run down his spine. These weren't soldiers. These were hunters. Another one raised its hand. A floating screen appeared. On it was Spark, curled up, asleep inside the barn. They knew exactly where he was. Joe backed away and turned to Spark. "They're here for you, and they're not going to ask nicely." Spark's wings twitched. His tail thumped the ground once. His small chest glowed with heat. Joe had never seen him look angry before, but now he looked like a tiny warrior. "They will take me," Spark said, "and burn this world. I must go." Joe shook his head. "You're not going anywhere. Not alone." Suddenly, the barn wall exploded. The 3 alien hunters had arrived. Floating inches above the ground, they entered like shadows, made of steel. "Stand aside, human," one said in a deep, echoing voice. Joe grabbed his shovel. "Not happening." The hunter moved a hand and Joe's body froze, lifted off the ground by invisible force. Spark screamed. It wasn't a sound. It was a roar of raw heat. Blue fire shot from his mouth, blasting the floor and walls. The hunters moved fast, shielding themselves, but the barn caught fire instantly. Joe dropped to the ground, coughing, the grip broken. "Run," he yelled. But Spark didn't run. He flew. For the first time, his wings carried him into the air, circling the hunters with sharp, fast turns. He spit more fire, confusing them, drawing them away from Joe. The barn burned brighter. Joe crawled out, dragging a broken leg. He turned back and saw Spark fighting for him. The little dragon dove at one hunter, biting into its armor. Sparks flew. Then a flash of red light hit Spark in the chest. He fell, hard, into the cornfield. Joe screamed, grabbed a metal rod from his fence, and charged. He didn't care if they were stronger. He didn't care if he would lose. This was his farm, his home, his family. He swung the rod at the nearest alien, hitting it straight in the mask. The mask cracked, and the creature staggered back. Behind Joe, a second beam came down from the ship, ready to pull Spark away. "No," Joe shouted. Then something unexpected happened. The ground under Spark began to glow. The spiral in the field. It wasn't just a mark. It was a gate, a memory, a code left long ago. As Spark touched it, the glow burst upward, throwing the aliens back. The fire turned white. The ship shuddered. And then, the sky rippled again. More lights appeared. Not red, not black, but blue and gold. Another ship was arriving, bigger than the first. But this one was different. Its design was smooth. Its light was warm, and inside it were more like Spark. Joe stared in shock. "Friends," Spark whispered, his voice weak. "My kind heard me." The sky was full of fire, but not just the kind that burns. It was alive. Golden light streaked across the clouds. The new ship that arrived floated silently above the burning barn, casting a warm glow across the land. It was larger than the hunter's ship, shaped like a winged flame, and its surface shimmered like glass touched by stars. Joe stood frozen, holding Spark's limp body in his arms. The baby dragon was still breathing, but barely. His chest rose and fell slowly, and his golden scales had dulled. "Stay with me," Joe whispered. "Don't you leave now." The hunter ship tried to retreat, but the golden vessel opened, and from it they descended. 3 majestic beings, tall, graceful, dragon-like aliens, floated down, their wings folded, their robes glowing with golden threads. Their eyes burned with gentle light like they held the sun inside. One stepped forward and spoke, not with sound but directly into Joe's mind. You cared for our last child. You fed the flame, you risked your life. Now, you are part of the bond. Joe stumbled backward, confused. Who are you people? The tall being looked at Spark and gently touched his head. Spark glowed again. His eyes opened, his wings stretched, but this time, they were different. Bigger, brighter, full of power. Spark stood up, not like a baby anymore, but like something older waking up after a long sleep. Joe, Spark said clearly, they are my people. I am Fireborn. Joe blinked. You can talk? I could always talk, Spark said, smiling a little. But I had to grow first. One of the golden beings turned to the hunters still hiding in the smoke. You broke the sacred law, she said in a deep voice. You hunted what should have been protected. The hunters didn't speak. Instead, they attacked. 3 red beams shot forward. But the golden dragons were faster. They lifted their hands, and with one bright flash, the beams bent in the air and turned into light. Then they disappeared. The hunters fell to the ground, stunned. Spark stepped forward, breathing golden fire. He didn't need to attack. He simply stood, and they ran. Joe stared in shock. What? Are you now? I am what my kind calls the awakening, Spark said. You fed me when I was dying. You protected me. You made the fire in my heart stronger. Joe looked at his burned barn, his broken tools, and then at Spark. I didn't know I was raising a legend. Spark nodded. You did more than raise me. You reminded me what it means to trust. That's something we forgot long ago. The female leader turned to Joe. We offer you something rare, she said. A place among us, not as a warrior, not as a servant, but as a guardian. Joe chuckled, tired and muddy. I'm just a farmer. You were, she said. But you loved something not of your world. And that love changed the sky. Spark stepped beside Joe and raised his wings. I won't go unless he comes too, Spark said. Joe sighed. And what if I say no? Spark smiled. Then I'll stay and burn your cornfield every morning. Joe laughed. You already burned my barn. Spark nudged him. Then it's time to build a better one. Together. The sky began to change again, healing where it had torn. The golden ship opened, revealing not cold metal, but a warm chamber glowing like a sunrise. Joe took one last look at his land. His animals, his broken tools. Then he looked at Spark, a dragon he fed by a fire, now ready to fly across stars. He smiled. All right, Joe said. Let's go build something new. And together they rose into the sky, one man, one dragon, and a future waiting in golden flame. Joe had never left Earth before. Now he sat inside a glowing starship floating between moons and stars. The golden ship was silent but not empty. Its walls shimmered like soft flames, alive with patterns that changed with every breath. It felt like being inside a warm dream. Yet everything was real. Spark sat beside Joe, no longer a small creature. He had grown taller, sleeker, with stronger wings and glowing patterns on his chest. You okay, Joe? Spark asked gently. Joe chuckled. I'm sitting in a dragon spaceship after leaving my cows behind. What do you think? Spark smiled. You miss them? I miss the quiet, Joe said, but not the trouble. Just then the ship slowed and arrived at a giant space station hidden inside a glowing nebula. It looked like a floating temple made of fire and crystal. Around it, golden ships flew in quiet formation. They had reached the Fireborn archive. The tall leader who had helped Spark stepped forward. Her name was Valari, and her voice still echoed inside Joe's mind. You are now on sacred ground, she said. This place holds the memories of our kind, and yours too, though you do not know it yet. Joe raised an eyebrow. My kind? Valari nodded. Long ago, Humans and Fireborn shared the stars. You were brothers, but war and time erased that truth. Joe followed her through glowing halls where floating walls showed living history. Images moved in light, ancient humans fighting beside dragons against something dark, something with sharp angles and eyes like red suns. One image showed a human man with armor and a dragon curled around him. That one looks like you, Spark said. Joe stared at it. It did. Same face, same eyes, same gentle smile. Impossible, Joe whispered. Valari touched the wall. Not impossible. You carry his blood. Joe stepped back. You mean I'm the last of a forgotten line, she said. That is why Spark's egg came to you. It was drawn by your soul. Joe sat down on a glowing bench. I was just feeding a hungry baby, that's all I did. No, Valari said. You gave hope. Spark walked over and placed his head on Joe's shoulder. You saved me, he said. And now, you've saved something more. But peace didn't last. That night, as Joe rested in his chamber, he heard a low thrum. It shook the walls like thunder underwater. An alarm, he rushed out and saw Valari speaking to her warriors. The Red Blades have found us, she said. Joe didn't know the name, but Spark did. They're the ones who hunted my kind. Spark said, his voice low. The ones who broke the stars. From the viewing window, Joe saw dark ships breaking through the nebula, shaped like blades, with red trails and dark weapons ready to fire. But this time, Spark didn't hide. He stepped forward. I want to protect this place, he said. And protect you. Valari nodded. Then you must unlock the fire you were born with. How? Spark asked. Valari turned to Joe. With him. Joe frowned. Me? The bond between Guardian and Fireborn is ancient. His fire follows your heart. If you trust each other, you will become one. Joe looked at Spark. Spark looked at Joe. Are you ready? Spark asked. Joe smiled, stood tall, and held out his hand. Let's show them what a farmer and a dragon can do. Spark touched his hand. And then it happened. A ring of flame burst around them. Golden fire wrapped their bodies, not to burn, but to join them. Joe's eyes glowed. Spark's wings flared. A symbol burned in the air above them. A human hand inside. A dragon's claw. Together they rose, fused by trust, and the station lit up with hope. The sky above the Fireborn archive had turned dark. The Red Blade fleet had broken through the nebula, and their shadowy ships circled like vultures. Inside their lead vessel stood the warlord, tall, silent, with glowing red eyes and armor that looked like sharpened stone. He pointed toward the archive. Burn everything, take the hatchling alive, kill the Guardian. Inside the archive, Joe and Spark were no longer the same. After the bond, they moved together, one soul in two bodies. Joe's eyes now flickered like flame. His body felt light, but full of power. He could feel Spark's heartbeat inside his own chest, and Spark. Spark had grown larger, majestic. His wings stretched wide and fire rippled beneath his golden scales. They stood side by side at the front of the archive. Are you scared? Spark asked. Joe smiled. I'm a farmer. I've faced angry cows and bad weather. This is just a little more explosive. Above them, Red Blade ships charged their weapons. The first blast fired. Spark flew into the air, dodging the beam, and let out a stream of blue and gold fire, melting one of the ships in seconds. Joe ran through the archive, leading the defense. He shouted orders without knowing how he knew them. The Guardian bloodline in him had awakened. Valari joined the battle too, leading her warriors through the air in sweeping arcs, their golden spears cutting through darkness. But the Red Blade, Warlord landed on the archive floor. He was huge, twice Joe's height, with claws that could cut stone. You are not worthy, he hissed at Joe. Joe stood firm, gripping an old farming tool, now glowing with fireborn energy. I fed what? You tried to kill. That makes me more than worthy, the warlord charged. Joe dodged, barely avoiding the massive blade. He rolled and struck back, the glowing tool slicing across the warlord's chest, leaving a mark of flame. But the warlord grabbed Joe and threw him against the crystal wall. Pain shot through Joe's body. The warlord raised his weapon for the final blow. Then boom! Spark slammed into the ground between them, roaring like a star had exploded. "You will not touch him," Spark shouted. The fire around him turned white. He opened his mouth, and from it came not fire, but a wave of light. It wasn't hot. It was pure. It lifted the warlord into the air and burned away the shadows around him. The warlord screamed, not in pain but in fear. "Light, true light," he whispered, before he vanished into dust. The rest of the Red Blade ships saw it, and fled. The sky cleared. The archive stood tall. The war was over. Later, as golden fire healed the broken walls, Spark and Joe stood at the highest tower. "You changed everything," Valari said. "You reminded us who we once were." Joe looked at Spark. "We just survived together." Valari nodded. "And sometimes, survival is the start of a legend." She raised her hand. A new symbol formed in the sky above the archive. A flame wrapped around a farming tool. "The Guardian of Earth," she said. "Let that name echo across the stars." Spark curled his tail around Joe and whispered, "Do you miss your farm?" Joe looked out at the galaxy. "I thought that was home," he said. "But maybe this is where I was always meant to be." Spark smiled. "There's still one thing left to build." "What's that?" "A new barn," Spark said. "With a big open roof. I don't like tight spaces anymore." Joe laughed. "All right then, let's build it. Together." And so, the farmer who fed a starving alien didn't just save a life, he changed a galaxy. And his story had only just begun.